Hi,
We're good.
welcome back to another episode of Locked In, where we provide football intel for the modern fan. I am the coach, Dr. Jeremy Locke, and I'm joined by my co-host, Chance Rollins. And last time we met, we talked Gasparilla Bowl, Central Florida, Georgia Tech, and we began that show with a bold statement that bowl games still matter. And we ended that show with a pretty bold pick, and we basically said there's no way in this world Central Florida's winning this game. That Georgia Tech was going to run through their weak defense. And well, what do you know? We were right. Um, what's just your first hot take off of that game? Because I mean, definitely it feels good to be that right about a game that so many I think disagreed with us on. So, what's your first impression about coming out of that game?
You know, um, I think people were quick to say that the game was over. You could see it all over social media. After the first quarter, UCF was up 14 to nothing on Georgia Tech, and they had some really big and explosive offensive plays. I'm not gonna lie, they were pretty good. And Georgia Tech wasn't really doing much on defense or offense. But after that first quarter, the game really got to going and it just went on from there.
What impressed you most about Central Florida's offense? Because to me, it seemed that Gus Malzahn's theory was, I'm going to jump on them with all fours from the get go, and it it really looked pretty scary there for a while if you're a Georgia Tech person. And I guess if you pick Georgia Tech to win, it also looked pretty scary. But what impressed you most about what Central Florida was doing in those first, say, 2, 3 possessions that they had?
I'm gonna be honest, the most impressive thing from Central Florida was their players. It's not like their scheme was that great. It's not like any play calls were just necessarily that great. It just looked like Georgia Tech was slow to start off. They just were getting into a feel for the game. And UCF's players, especially their receiver, went out. Baker, he had just went out and had some big time catches. And then Harvey, their running back, he made a few good runs. I mean, there was a 20-yard run in there at one point. So, I mean, they just
Yeah.
had some big burst plays where their players stepped up and made some big time plays. And I think that's what put them over the edge in the first quarter.
I think that, with the just even the opening return, and we had mentioned actually Xavier Townsend, who was it was a 47-yard return opening kickoff. And, we'd said, that guy's a burner. I mean, he's their jet sweep man. So, it was a big start. Then, they have a pretty decent run from the quarterback. And then, like you said, Harvey busts that 20-yard run, gets them down to Georgia Tech's 25-yard line. And honestly, to me, I mean, it looked like it was going to be a foregone conclusion that Central Florida was going to run away with this, because when and the thing I think that at first glance, I wondered, and just thinking about the things we'd said in terms of giving a preview and some analysis of what we thought was going to go on in this game. The one thing that worried me was that we had talked about all of Central Florida's success coming against terrible defenses. Well, Georgia Tech, they fit the bill for that. They're a pretty bad defense statistically. What really, I think my first impression was, maybe Tech doesn't have cornerbacks who can keep up with Javon Barker, because man, that first catch he made was, I mean, that was just stupid. I mean, it was unbelievable. But the more that I've gone back and looked at this, you got to give a lot of credit to Plumlee, the quarterback, because he honestly dropped some of those balls basically in a bucket. And I don't know if it was so much coverage as it was just, those are two people who are really in sync. Baker is a great athlete. Plumlee can really throw a football, and they showed that off, especially early in the game.
Yeah, no, it was really impressive some of those catches that he made in the first quarter, and the throws were pinpoint accurate. I think he kind of dwindled away after the first quarter, though. I don't know if it was the running that he did that took away from his throwing, but I know he didn't throw as nearly as well after that first quarter.
Yeah, and well, one of the things too with him that got me from the get go, and I'd seen that, in later games that they played. Um, Boy, that was a public, very big knee brace he's wearing.
Yeah, he
And,
did also get injured during the game, went out for a
yeah,
play.
he did. And, and then I think one of the things that really, there were a few momentum shifters, I think, throughout that game. And then one was almost a huge momentum shifter that, I guess that they recovered from with a touchdown was the sack that was almost an interception. And I can't help but wonder just, the way that he went down and trying to fight away and then kind of the awkward fall. Stuff like that takes a toll on you. And then the more that you try to run the ball, like you say, if you're taking hits, I don't know. I mean, it's eventually going to catch up to those running quarterbacks.
Yeah, I don't think I could take 15 hits in a game, let alone, well, I mean, that's just the minimum he took from running. And I mean, he's not built for that. He's a quarterback. He's built to stand in the pocket, maybe get hit 5 times a game. And you're talking about 15 just running the ball, meeting someone head on head. Like that's gotta hurt. That's gonna leave a lick, especially if you're not built for it.
And I mean, he looks like I mean, I don't know what his numbers are, but he's a good sized guy. But he looks a lot more like he would be at home in a pro style offense rather than the Malzahn spread. I mean, that's just my thought. But I think that I'd like to see him in more of a pro setup than having him out there, trying to to gain some yards, for the offense. But he did what he had to do, and early on, it looked like that they had every answer, and I think that that one. I'm very impressed by the fact that Georgia Tech didn't lay down. They, like what we were saying earlier, just before we came on the recording about having faith that Tech was going to pull this out because of what we knew about them. The I think the same thing could be said with that botched punt when they Tech really had them pinned back. I mean, that was one of the dumbest punt return decisions I have ever seen. Almost ran himself right into a safety and managed to get it out, just basically in the absolute shadow of the goalpost. But so you think, hey, Tech's fixing to make some kind of a stand here. Son of a gun just hauls off and just drops a dead on pass, 30 yards down the field. And you have to think that those Tech boys, if they aren't bought in, they're thinking, boy, here it goes. Like, the whole world's against us. But I mean, you got to credit the coaching staff, and you got to credit, those guys in the Georgia Tech, just sideline. Really, they never gave up, and there was every reason for them to give up. So, that's quite impressive.
Yeah, I really think it's impressive when you look at like what Haynes King did after us talking about him. I mean, I know if you look at the stats and didn't really watch the game, you might think he didn't do a whole lot, especially passing since he threw that pick. But he shouldn't like that pick. It was in his guy's hands, and it was
Yeah, it was.
a hard ball to pick, and UCF's guy just rolled over with it. And it really felt like everything in the world was against Georgia Tech at most points in the game. It really did. In every quarter, but they fought hard, they battled, they played grown man football and ran the ball well and won the game.
And the other thing too to go along with that, talking about playing grown man football, I always thinking, I guess I was looking ahead a little bit to some of the bowl games on Wednesday, but I was looking at the Virginia Tech Tulane game, and I was thinking back to the old phrase, from there in the mid '90s and and shortly into the 2000s. But what they, I guess, in the Virginia Tech pre-Michael Vick days, they called Beamer ball, and you run the ball, you play gritty defense, you try to make turnovers, and you try to do something right on special teams to affect the game. What about that kicker for Georgia Tech? We didn't mention the kickers at all, but that dude put 9 points on the board, 3 of 3. And in the style of play that Georgia Tech has, if you have a kicker that can flat nail them down, you're going to win some football games just because of that.
Yeah, no, that was, I mean, you think about it. Take away 9 points from Georgia Tech or even 6, that's a different ball game because UCF isn't having to run the top plays they're having to run to gain up a whole other touchdown or a whole 2 touchdowns to get back in the game. I mean, kicks go a long way, so do special teams, especially since that just gives them worse field position once you make a kick. They're not on the 30, the 40-yard line. They got to go all the way back to the 20, 25, wherever they run the
Yeah.
ball back to. I mean, it makes a big difference having that kicker.
And you don't think about that a lot. I think especially, or at least in my opinion, um, I think that's something you learn from playing the game, coaching the game. Um, Starting on the 20-yard line is not optimal. And I know that we come to expect college and pro teams to be able, to put the ball in the end zone. But if you give a team a chance to start on the 35-yard line, there's a whole different level of momentum that comes into play. There's a whole different mentality. And so, yeah, I think that when you can pin them back and make them drive that whole field, there's plenty more opportunities for an offense to make a mistake, plenty more opportunities for something to stall out. And so I think special teams for Georgia Tech, it really did go a long way in affecting this game. And like I said, field goals might not seem like much, but three of them turned it into a two-possession ball game, and that's exactly what happened. With Georgia Tech's kicker. So you can't complain about that facet of the game at all. Anything else in general you'd want to say about it before we move a little deeper?
Yeah, I don't remember his name exactly, but their Georgia Tech's middle linebacker, that dude controlled the field on defense. And I mean, it really shows. I mean, they had 3 sacks and 4 tackles for loss. It felt like they were in old John Rice Plumlee's face all night. They even had 5 pass deflections. I mean, they had a pretty great game on defense. Even giving up 17 points overall and 14 being in the first quarter. So I mean, they played a pretty well game on defense, and they made it hard for them to score. But I mean, UCF's offense it is high powered. I mean, you can tell by the players they have. So I mean, I commend Georgia Tech for what they accomplished on the night.
Yeah, they definitely didn't beat a slouch. I mean, that's 100% for sure. Now with the middle linebacker, are you talking about the Eford guy, the
I
one with the
think,
neck roll?
yeah, the one with the neck roll, the old school football middle linebacker. I think he wears 44.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I think of when I see that guy, the first time I saw him was in the Georgia game, and I thought, where in God's name did this kid come up with that neck roll?
Yeah.
And it's like a blast from the past. I mean, I can remember, back in the '90s, everybody wearing that. Kyle Eford is his name. 6'2", 219, a Decula Falcon. Get this, freshman.
Oh, God, now that says something about your defense right there. You got a freshman out there leading the defense and middle linebacker and playing the way he plays. I mean, I think, Georgia Tech, as much as people want to talk about them, they're in the right direction. Even if they were
I think
predicted to
they are
lose this
too.
game, they are in the right direction. I think so.
With just staying with Eford, he led the team in solo tackles, assisted tackles. I mean, is this guy's he's something else. He really is, and I mean, he's just got that look. And I mean, he's a Georgia Tech football player because the thing that gets me with Tech is that they can't recruit. Like you mentioned the other night in talking about them, that definitely you got big brothers sitting there in Athens. You really do. But the other thing that you got whenever you're Georgia Tech, and this is something, I mean, I haven't heard Brent Key say anything about it because I mean he's a Tech guy, so I mean he just that's part of his life. But Paul Johnson used to mention it. God Almighty, at the academic requirements, that's a tough school to get into, no matter who you are. And so it's hard to find players. I would assume, but the thing of it is we in Eford, they've done a fine job, and I think that's a guy that a lot of other people might not really have picked up on. And so kudos to Georgia Tech for finding a guy like that, and they're going to have him for 3 more years. The something else that I wanted to mention too, just in general about it, is I don't know if you've had the chance to go watch any of the talk surrounding it. Just like things leading up to the Gasparilla Bowl, but I would encourage, and then and I'm upfront about my bias on this. I'm a Brent Key fan. I mean, I'm really a Brent Key fan. Um, you need to hear this guy talk. His demeanor, he I've seldom seen coaches who feel like that they have things by the tail the way this man feels like. He's relaxed. There's no neuroticism in him. He's a cool guy. You can just tell it. And the way that he talks about the team, it's so interesting. I saw before the bowl, I saw an interview with him that I think the ACC network did, and this is pretty impressive. I think he said that Georgia Tech, that the numbers just came back from the fall semester. They have the highest GPA in 10 years at Tech. So the football team is moving in the right direction, and the academics are moving in the right direction. On top of that, something that he also that I mean, he was giddy about it. He was so happy. Not a single Georgia Tech player opted out of the bowl game. Everybody played. And I think that his mindset is that they saw that bowl is closing this season out, and they're going to essentially do, like, I guess, just a brain dump. They're going to go home for the holidays, and he's like, we're hitting the next season. He's like, that's the end of the 23 season. He's like, 24 starts when we come back. I have to believe that they're going to be an interesting team to watch next year, given the number of people that they have coming back. So I'm really excited about it. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about for a bit too, that might not seem to stand out whenever you talk about Tech, their offense is an absolute piece of work, and I'm talking schematically. Now, Central Florida, they showed who they were. They're going to throw it deep. They're going to try to, they're going to run it around you. They're going to run it through you. They have athletes. I mean, just absolute athletes. And that's not to say that Georgia Tech did not have athletes, but you could tell that Central Florida from the get-go was that their philosophy was, we have athletes, feel their wrath. And I think they hoped that was going to be enough. Now, of course, it wasn't nearly enough, but Tech struck me as having a very distinct plan on offense, and they stuck with it, and they never got away from it. What say you about the Georgia Tech offense game plan?
I think their game plan was exactly what was showed on the field, and that was, we're going to run the ball and we're going to stick with it. And we're not going to give it to one person. We're not going to give it to two people. We're going to give it to three or four people in different directions, and we're going to put the blockers there. We're telling you where we're going pretty much, and we're going to go there.
Yeah, they have some. There's a little bit, I guess, if you could say, of deception in what they're doing. But when they come to the line, like you said, there's no doubt. I mean, they're going to run the football, and you're going to have to stop, Haynes, the running back. You're going to have to stop King, the quarterback. You're going to have to even take into consideration the jet sweep, even if they only use it as a decoy. I mean, the mere fact that they have it there means that you can get burnt with it, and nobody wants to give up a ton of yardage on a jet sweep. It's bad for morale. People, they always say, oh, it's a simple play to defend. But man, I tell you, you see people get burnt with them all the time. And one of the things that I noticed that really stood out to me, I mean, I saw it a lot in the Georgia game, and I saw it again a lot last night, was the amount of, I guess you could say, just deceptive blocking patterns that they pull off. And so we both, have had the opportunity to coach a pretty good bit of football. So tell me, I want to just talk about training linebackers. Whenever you go to train a linebacker to stop the run, what's the first thing that you start teaching that kid about?
Read your read keys pretty much, and that's just
That's exactly
where
that's exactly
you're
what I was
looking,
thinking.
where
Yeah,
you're looking and what they're doing.
and we often talk about, and it's a weird phrase, and I think whenever I say it around people, they don't know what I mean, and that's okay. I mean, I'll probably end up whipping them one day. I want robots at linebacker. I want absolute robots. I want them to, they seek and destroy. When they see the blocking pattern, I want them to attack where the ball's going, right?
Yeah, when they see a guard pull, they better know to go. When they see that running back, that H back in the back shifting over, they better see that going. When they see the running back take that counter step, They better be closing in.
Yeah, because for a linebacker, they are. I mean, I think in some sense, and this is going to sound crazy, you know, they are the ultimate paranoia kings. When they see something, they have to trust their eyes because that position plays so quickly. And if you think about just the nature of uh, running the ball in a football game, falling forward for a yard, that adds up. You don't think about that, but that adds up. So if that linebacker, if he reads guard goes down, guard's pulling, fullback's coming, it's power, let me get to the C gap, wham, takes on the lead blocker maybe, and stuffs it up so the backside linebacker can come clean things up for him, that's a big deal. But now, by the same token, if you get basically a messy fit with that pulling guard who's leading the way on that play, and you allow that running back to get, I don't know, what looks like maybe a foot more, that son of a gun will fall forward every single time, and he will end up getting a yard and a half that he did not need to get. And we know how that goes. If you get an extra yard and a half about 20 times in a football game, you're picking up a lot of yardage. We're talking about third and short, it becomes first down instead of fourth down. Somebody stopped at the 1, well, that turns into a touchdown. And it's all these little hidden yards that really instinctive, fast playing linebackers take out of the game for a defense. And it's one of, I think, the most underappreciated aspects of the game. And what Georgia Tech did was really ingenious. They screwed over Central Florida's linebackers with a lot of their running plays. So you want to talk a bit about how that they did that?
Yeah. So do you want to go over their little counter the first play?
Sure. Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, and I can say something about that. I'm a big fan of the counter not as a misdirection play, but as a power play. I find that a lot of times, and I think that you're seeing it become increasingly that in just contemporary football, we don't have many fullback types anymore. And used to the off tackle play was power. And whenever we say power, what we mean is you got a tight end, you got a fullback behind the quarterback. It's basically I formation football. That fullback is going to kick the defensive end. Everybody's blocking down. You have a guard who wraps through and is the lead blocker. The tailback gets behind him, and you're looking to pick up 4 yards. And that was the play for many, many years. That was the king of plays when it was 3 yards in a cloud of dust. Well, we don't play that way anymore. We just simply don't. And I think that what you've seen happen is different manifestations of the counter have taken over the power run game for a lot of teams. I think like what we call the gap scheme runs. So a lot of times what teams will do, at least traditionally, college and high school teams, they call it GT counter. The guard kicks the backside guard pulls to the play side, kicks out the end. The tackle wraps and lead blocks. And the running back will take a jab step, a counter step, as you called it a minute ago, to the opposite side of where the play's going. It makes the linebackers step with him, and it gives those linemen time to get through. Well, the problem now that you have is that since we're really pass oriented, you got these big 6'6", 325, 330-pound tackles, and they're just simply not fast enough to get to the hole to lead up on somebody like, say, Georgia Tech's Eford. Just not going to happen. So what a lot of teams have started doing in college and even in high school is they run what they call a GH counter. So you have an H-back typically situated pretty close to the line of scrimmage, what they call a sniffer. And they call them sniffers, because their nose is basically in the butt of the lineman in front of them. Maybe they're a wing, maybe they're, offset from the guard. But either way, what happens is that H-back is a much faster player, and he can wrap up in there fast enough to affect the linebackers who maybe the tackle can. But last night with Georgia Tech, they did something that at least to me, was quite different. One play in particular, this was after they had the forced fumble and recovery. The drive ended up being a field goal drive, and it didn't seem like that big of a deal. But on 3rd down and 6, this was the first 3rd down they faced. It looked like it was going to be another 3 and out. But they line up in twins closed, which means they have 2 wide receivers spread out wide to the left side. They have a tight end on the right side, and they had Haynes King at quarterback in the shotgun, and a running back who, to me, was just simply too far away from King to really impact the play. And he was kind of lined up, say behind the tackle, maybe a yard in front of King. So he's out there a little bit. Well, Georgia Tech then sends their Z wide receiver, the outside receiver to the right, in jet motion, and King rides him for a step like he's going to hand the ball off. Well, when Central Florida sees this, they do what you're supposed to do. They're in a Miami 4-3, which means there's 2 inside linebackers and 1 outside linebacker that's lined up, in this case, to the twin side, because they're anticipating a sweep to that side. So he creeps hard and essentially goes on a blitz at that jet sweep man. One problem, there's no jet sweep. King pulls the ball and he runs a counter play to the other side. So now here's what happened. The left side of the offense, the linebacker over their left side. So it'd be the defense's right. So I just want to make sure people know what I'm talking about. When the offense looks at this guy, he's on the left side. So when the linebacker who creeps up to make a play on the jet sweep moves, that means that inside linebacker must now bump out and be responsible for what will be coming through the attacking linebacker's gap. That really puts him in a tough spot. Okay, that side's taken care of. We're not running the football there for Georgia Tech. We're just getting them stretched out and away from the play. So next what happens? The left guard pulls to the right. You can see Central Florida's, we need film of this, but you can see Central Florida's right inside linebacker shoot up near the tackle because he thinks this is a power play. Something's happening there. Well, what he doesn't realize is instead this is a quarterback counter that's going to hit one gap to the inside of where he's at. He jumps back hard and makes a really good overcorrection. But the problem is, instead of a tackle or even an H-back coming through to lead, Georgia Tech takes that running back from the backfield, coming from a spot this linebacker has not seen a wrapper coming from. And by the time he sees what's going on, he's already sealed inside. Haynes Boyd picks up the 6 yard, then he picks up 23 more yards. And just the reaction from the crowd, just the reaction from the offense, you could tell right there they thought, yeah, we can run the ball on this team. And for the rest of the night, we saw that little counter action go on and on and on, whether it was Haynes King or, whether it was, Haynes the running back. They ran it and just kept on running it and ended up with 284 yards rushing.
Yeah.
And to me, go ahead.
I was gonna say, you really wonder why. Like, I understand why they played so hard on the jet the first time, because as we mentioned before the game, I mean, Georgia Tech is gonna have that one jet sweep a game. They're gonna get a good bit of yardage from it. And in that 3rd and 6 position, yeah, say they run the jet, they're looking to get their average first down from their jet a game. And that would really impact the game at that point. But after that, to do it all night and just stay consistent with it, you just have to put it up to, well, that's just them being robotic.
Mm-hmm.
And I just can't get over the fact why they never changed anything.
And honestly, that was, and I can't remember. I guess I'm trying to think back and edit myself right here. I can't remember if we said this on the show or if we were talking about this in general. Central Florida doesn't make a lot of adjustments at all. And everything looks base. I mean, there's nothing. They have their plays on offense, they have their looks on defense. And I mean, personally, I think Georgia Tech knew that. I think Georgia Tech, see, the thing that I guess that I find interesting, I mentioned the other day that if I were Georgia Tech, I would go back and watch the UCF Kansas State game. Okay. All you have to do is watch the little ESPN highlight video from like throughout the games, 10-minute video basically. And I swear unto you, if you go back and look at the Kansas State game, you will see that the passes that Kansas State hurt UCF with, Georgia Tech hurt them with. They knew what they were doing. They went back and they're going to find the plays that kill the Knights, and we're going to run them, for better or for worse. My question is, how can a defense have that happen to them in September and then have the same things happen to them in December? I don't know, but they play a really bland style of defense, in my opinion. And I think Georgia Tech knew that going in. And so what they did was they stayed with their plan. They manipulated their linebackers' reads. They hit them with passes when they could, whether play action or, whether, just other, just dropbacks, to some extent. They didn't really throw the ball that much, 13 times for 87 yards, completed 7 of them. But what that did was just like good old wishbone football. When they threw them, they really counted. And that was the thing that I found to be most impressive about them. Even going back to that 3rd down and 6 counter run, that is a play call that is straight out of Tom Osborne's playbook from Nebraska for as far back as you want to go. The counter is a pass play for Nebraska in the old days. And you give them 3rd and 5, 3rd and 6, they will run the counter. And you know what the amazing thing about it is? They will get the first down with the counter. Georgia Tech showed you that a very old, basically 4-back offense principle, it's still alive and well. And, and I think they also showed us if you line up and run it down their throat, you're probably going to win.
Yeah, it was honestly a fun game to watch. I had a fun time.
Definitely.
If anybody was betting on it, they won some money. I know a few of my friends did that I told about it. They won some money. I mean, rightfully so. I mean, you do the right thing, you're gonna win some money.
I bet they were calling you first quarter.
Oh, I was getting calls left and right. Why did you tell me to do this? It's like, well, you just gotta have faith.
I think so. Any parting shots you have about the Gasparilla Bowl?
I just hope that the rest of these games continue to carry on to be as good. I know we didn't talk about it, but Air Force upsetting James Madison, I saw that one coming from a mile away, and I don't really think it was that much of an upset. But I think during these bowl games, you'll see a lot of these that aren't supposed to be upset like that. Are supposed to be upsets, but they really shouldn't be. And I don't know why they do that so much.
No, I don't either. The thing that got me, and just like with the Georgia Tech game, I just couldn't get over the fact that Big 12 brand of defense. It's almost like they have a gentleman's agreement to not do certain kinds of things out there. Now I know that Iowa State, they always play different from what a lot of them do. But the thing that always gets me is it's like they almost mirror each other's style, and I guess that happens maybe everywhere to some extent. But I knew going in that game, Georgia Tech wasn't going to mirror anybody's style. They were going to do what they were going to do, and they have some players who flat out stand out. I mean, that's honestly all you can say about that Tech team. And the thing that really, like we mentioned, the Eford kid earlier, freshman, Haynes King's a sophomore. He's back next year. On top of that, Jamal Haynes, running back, sophomore. And they got a couple of really good receivers who are coming back. A big tight end coming back. I mean, this is a team that's got people coming back. So I mean, I'm interested to see what that they can do. And I guess maybe call me old fashioned, but I like to see these running teams have some success. I mean, I guess it takes me back a bit. So I'm always excited whenever you get a team that's pushing 300 yards rushing like what Tech did, and no doubt what Air Force probably did today. I didn't get to see that game. But yeah, it's interesting to see this, and I think that more than anything, these bowls establish some kind of a pecking order. UCF, after their first quarter fireworks, it wasn't that Georgia Tech just beat them. Georgia Tech hammered them. It double digit loss. So I mean I don't know. I mean, I think that there are going to be some, I guess you could say, some indictments about different styles of play, different maybe different conferences where they go on. I think as you see these teams go head to head, it'll be interesting to see what the outcomes are.
Yeah, I hope them Young Bucks do good next year. And that being said, I think we'll wrap up this video unless you have anything else to say.
No, no, I'm good with it. I'm with you. You know, I'd like to see them keep going forward and developing that program. I think they've got something good going down there.
Alrighty. Well, that'll be it for y'all. Hope y'all enjoyed. More coming soon with all these bowl games coming up. We'll catch you next time, so stay locked in.